Now, let's all embark on a journey through the heart of agribusiness, navigating the delicate balance between economic efficiency and environmental sustainability. As the world faces the dual challenges of feeding a growing population while combating the impacts of climate change, the discussions happening here today are more crucial than ever. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed speakers. Leandro Pongelupi is an assistant professor of management at Wharton and a specialist in socio-environmental impact. Fun fact, he's also Brazilian. Luiz Dutra is the vice president of corporate affairs at Bracell. He has over 36 years of experience in companies such as J&J, Dow, Unilever, Votorantim, and Mover Holdings.
Elizabeth Farina is the former executive director of WRI Brazil, as well as a senior professor at the School of Economics, Business, and Accounting at the University of São Paulo. Leticia Kawanami is the Sustainability Director of Cargill Agricultural Supply Chain South America. She's also a Global Leadership Fellow from the World Economic Forum, an executive program with 5 business schools, including Wharton. Together, they will explore the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for agribusinesses. Welcome.
First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I would like to thank all the panelists for joining us in this discussion on such an important sector for Brazilian economy and Latin American economy in general. I would just like to remind everyone, if you have questions, please use the app, send your questions. We're going to have some time for the audience Q&A at the end. And I would like to kick us off asking, so we have agribusiness is so important for the economic development in Latin America and in Brazil, but at the same time, we have this discussion on how to balance the agricultural productivity with pressures for climate change and preservation. So if you could describe a little bit from your organizations, what are the actions and some examples of activities that you are doing trying to balance these two trends? Luis, if we may start with you.
Okay, thank you very much. My pleasure to be here. Before talking specific about our plans, I'd like to put in context that Bracell belongs to an international group, RG, based in Singapore, and we have 3 important pillars in terms of business: paper, pulp, and downstream tissue, palm oil, and natural gas. So the business build on portfolio of natural resource. In our business, the sustainability is an intrinsic part of the business. Bracell, which we are in Brazil, it is in Brazil for the last 20 years. The philosophy is very clear. The business, the supply chains, to the two faces of the same coin. So just to give some examples, last year we launched Bracell 2030. It's a long-term commitment of sustainability where covering 5 areas: climate, biodiversity, sustainable production, community, and people. So our vision is critical to have this fully integrated. For each one, you have 14 commitments long term. For each one, translate into goals, specific KPIs, quarterly measuring. But our vision is to combine, the sustainability part in terms of resources management that can talk about the cost efficiency, but in the same way, especially in Brazil, going beyond in terms of society commitment. So we are very focused on social parts and community parts. Just to give an example, we have last year 49 projects achieving 200,000 people in 7 different cities in Brazil. We are operating in Bracell, in São Paulo, in Mato Grosso, and Bahia. So just try to catch up here. As you mentioned, it's a critical part of sustainability, but sustainability in the pulp sector, that Brazil nowadays is the biggest producer, the biggest exporter, the sustainability is a critical part of the business. So in Bracell, belonging to RGE, we have the same philosophy. It's a very, very critical part for us, having this commitment for long term.
That's really interesting. Also, you bring in this perspective of not only environment, but people as well.
Yeah, for
right? Sure. Professor Beth, I will call you professor. You were my professor back in time, right? So many of your students probably are here too. So Beth, could you also elaborate a little bit on how you see this balance between economic efficiency and environmental preservation?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. I feel very comfortable seeing some ex-students. And today we are discussing in USP, the University of São Paulo, the economics department, we are discussing exactly this intersection between agribusiness and sustainability. Sustainability is a new focus, let's say, in FEA, in the economics department of University of São Paulo. And, but it's really important. So now we have some courses related to this connection between the agribusiness, food production, energy production, very important. And so what we discuss how we can, by competing or marketing the products of the environment, the social, the governance, so the famous ESG. But what we are discussing now is how economics, or the science of economics, respond to the challenges of these two different areas and the intersection between them. Of course, I spent many years at the Sugarcane Industry Association, 6 years there, when I could be a testimony of the effort that this industry has made to be more, let's say, more friendly to produce food, produce energy, but respect the environment. And this is an economic question, because why market doesn't play this role of being the regulator of this intersection? Why I need laws to regulate? Why I need organizations that regulate? Just because I am sure you know better than me, because markets have failures. And in this case, environment, what we have there is that we have externalities. So costs are not there, economic costs are not there, and economic benefits are not there either. So what we have? Market is failures. So I need to correct these failures, to put together food, energy, and sustainability. This is an experience of in different areas that I had the opportunity to explore. I was more than 30 years at the University of São Paulo discussing competition, antitrust. And why not competition solve the problem? Because of market failure. But also, regulation does not resolve, because there are lots of regulations failures. And who is in Brazil knows what I am saying better than many other people. And so we have this regulation, and something that is very important. We have a discussion and an intersection between people and, as you mentioned, it's very important to remember that people are there, and we have to give them incentives and controls to make the life easier.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I mean, it's like sounds like music to my ears. I study sustainability. By the way, there will be my class as well soon, talking about those topics in the Amazon context, and precisely as you're mentioning, right? Like how we can use the power of markets to internalize the externalities, right? Internalize both positive and negative externalities in the environment, and potentially trade, right? Or potentially use the force of market to solve some of those problems. But Leticia, I would like to also hear a little bit from you. What are your takes on those topics?
Well, it's hard to follow Professor Farina. I also call her professor because she was my professor. So thank you for the invitation to be here on this panel with the distinguished panelists. And it's really an honor to be here with my ex-professor. She was my professor of microeconomics, and she was very scary. I was very scared of her.
Much better now.
Because right now she's just talking and giving just a basic speech about microeconomics and market failures, but she was very tough when she was grading papers. So, but I also thank her and thank USP for having prepared me, because afterwards, it allowed me to have an international career, to go on, and even to be a fellow student at Wharton with you. So I thank you very much for all the dedication that you had to your students at USP.
Thank you.
Well, I can talk about this subject forever. I've been working in sustainability for a while, and I've seen how it transitioned, and it really grew in terms of importance in the corporate world. Before Cargill, I was at Suzano, so also in the Pulp and Sector paper, and before that at the World Economic Forum, where really, at the forum, they really look at what's the forefront and what's navigating the future. So even when I was looking at the title here, it sounded a lot like some of the sessions that we had at the forum, and pretty soon they realized that global public goods were of extreme importance in solving some of the world's biggest issues. It also features in our CEO survey, in the forum's CEO surveys, right? So year and year after year, the CEOs mention environmental crisis, water, and also some of the social issues as being what's in their mind, right? As something that they cannot necessarily directly control, but something that will impact their business. So this is how some of the government policies, but also some of the corporate policies will help, because you cannot directly control, but if you look into the future, you can maybe minimize or mitigate some of the issues that sustainability or climate change and other nature-related issues might bring. So you can mitigate those issues, and you also can be more resilient when some of those issues happen, because now we've already reached the point that some of the negative consequences will happen anyway. But going back to efficiency, I'm really proud of working here in Brazil in agriculture. I work at Cargill. It's an international company, but it's been in Brazil since 1965. So it's a company that's very rooted in Brazil. We work with several producers. We have more than 15,000 producers as our clients, and several other indirect producers that we have a relationship with through cooperatives. And it's really fascinating to see how they're dedicated to agriculture and how also technology has helped them improve their productivity, while it enables them to also be more gentle with the environment. So yesterday, I think Roberto mentioned Embrapa, and really, if you're Brazilian, you've heard about Embrapa several times, and it's really enabled Brazilian agriculture to advance, to grow products that 30 years ago were never thought of that you could produce in areas like the Cerrado. Today, you can even grow grapes in the semi-arid areas of Brazil. I think Brazil is increasing significantly its production of olives and olive oil. When I was a kid, olive oil was something very special and imported. It was very expensive. And now you can produce it here, and actually Brazil is focusing on premium olive oil. And just to name another statistics, in the beginning of this century, so Brazil was producing about 100 million tons of grains, And today it produces around 300 million tons, so 3 times as much. And what's interesting about it is that it produces 3 times as much in the area that is less than double the size. So this means, without a doubt, increase in productivity. That for my area is very important because it also demonstrates that you can grow, you can be more efficient, and you don't have to push the deforestation frontier, right? So you can grow more more agricultural products without deforestation. And in fact, you can take areas that were deforested in the past that maybe because of the way that agriculture was done at the time or because of technology, the areas were underutilized. And today, thanks to technology, you can really renovate that area, you can rehabilitate the area that's degraded, and you can turn it into a very productive agricultural land. So I think you can't look at agriculture, especially in Brazil or in the southern hemisphere here in the Americas, without thinking about technology.
No, this is really a conversation that pleases me a lot, and this anticipates a little bit of my next question, right? So in thinking about the big challenges or opportunities for the agribusiness sector in the future, and we just heard about technology, especially AI, how do you see the application of technology as actually helping, contributing to solve some of those challenges, or what are the opportunities that you see? So Luis, if you want to.
Yeah, I think in light of a question, but take advantage of Professor Farina's provocation that I really like it, I like to move a step behind. I think just to provide example, in RG Group, there's a 5 C's philosophy. It means the company must be good for the community, for the climate, community, customer, country. You only covering these shareholders, stakeholders, going to be good for the company. So it's the mantra, it's a philosophy. In Brazil, we translate this in a different approach, more customized, that we believe that the companies here in Brazil for the last 10 years, we invest here $6.5 billion in 20 years, and much more to come. Technology, of course, is a part of this. I will mention this part. But to translate this in a statement that make a difference in every detail. It is driven by the value creation mindset. So taking account the chain of the business, the forest, mills, supply chain, customers and consumers, we are also in downstreams in consumer goods. We believe that you look for each pillar with the value creation mindset, you can better accelerate the discussion about technology for the future, is one point. Another point I think is very important to mention, what I have learned in my career, there's 3 kinds of companies. One kind of company, you have companies that I really admire that have a very long-term perspective, a visionary, but not good in terms of execution. So I have another kind of company, very focused on deliver every quarter, every year, but with a sort of gap for the long-term commitment in the entrepreneur in terms of the transformation. You have very few companies can combine the long-term vision, entrepreneur, with the capability of execution. So RGE Brazil is amazing how they do this very well. And for me, there are some pillars to make it happen. I think it's the arena of expertise is driven by 5 pillars: purpose, governance, strategy, organization/culture, execution. So Brazil is based on 4 pillars. One pillar is investment, long-term investment, long-term commitment for the country. As I mentioned, we invest here $6.5 billion. The second pillar is job generation, aligned with people development, not just worried about bring people to the company, but develop people internally. The 4th pillar, of course, is the positive impact in environmental and social. And the 4th pillar is technology innovation. By saying that, we believe we have a sort of vital cycle. Investment, people development, community impact, and continuous improvement of the system through the innovation and technology. Is just to try to summarize how you see this in a broad sense, driven by purpose and governance.
No, that's very interesting, actually. I mean, this motivates the students to go to the MBAs because many of those topics we see in class. But Beth, I would like to, based on your experience at CADE, the antitrust board in Brazil, and Unica, the sugarcane industry, what do you see as, for the future, the biggest challenges and opportunities, and how technology can help us reconcile economic efficiency with the environment?
Difficult. Difficult because we have many challenges to face. And we were talking about technology. Technology is the basic. We need technology in order to improve our action in sustainability, looking at food security, food sustainability, energy, fuel and hydropower, electricity, okay? And so we have this technology that have to respond to the needs of the farmers, consumers, entrepreneurs. So this technology is really important. However, technology cannot save us, as I mentioned before, because we cannot bet only on technology. Sometimes you have the technology, but you have to exercise the action. So this is really, really important. And I like one discussion that has going on, that is why technology with market does not save us. When I say save us, I am saying against the climate changes and the climate challenges. So the last one problem is the first mover disadvantage. We are discussing technology. We know that the first to move many times have advantages because knowing the product, so the first mover advantage. But if the first mover has problems with the costs, because when you put the public policy such as carbon pricing, carbon tax, so you put the social cost of carbon in your calculus, I would say.
Yeah.
And then you lose a little bit the competitiveness with the ones that do not do this. And this is one thing that many times is discussed for cattle, for meat, for the production of pork. But what I would like to mention is that I have to bring this first mover disadvantage to work better on our discussion and action and plans. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Especially like to think about the whole of strategy, right? How can we actually overcome and internalize those costs and create competitive advantage with new technologies? Leticia, what do you see on your operation as the big challenges or even opportunities, and how can actually, you mentioned Embrapa, right, and now the investments on developing new variants that would be resilient to more adverse climate. How do you see the future of the sector and use of technology to solve some of those challenges?
I see it very promising. I think technology can really help, but as Professor Farina said, the challenges are very big, and I'd like to connect these 2 points of the opportunity, but also, yeah, the disadvantage of the first movers, which for a company, it's very much related to costs. And again, I think yesterday in Roberto's keynote speak, he talked about AI and how he decided to invest in AI. Right? And these are the types of decisions that you have to take every day. So in which direction do you go? In which type of technology do you invest in? Cargill invests in a lot of innovation, both technological innovation that will help us produce better what is already being produced, but also looking at technology to produce different things that today isn't even consumed, or at least isn't even consumed at great scale, like artificial meat, right? And here in the region, Cargill invested $30 million in a fund to support startups. It's called Land Innovation Fund. And last year, I was at Piracicaba, which is really a hub of innovation in agriculture. It's also a USP campus. And it's fascinating to see so many young graduates working to try to solve some of these problems. And it's fascinating to see how it is the problems that interest them, right? They don't want to go into a big company and just kind of have a job. They really want to, they're interested about the problem and coming up with solutions. And some of the solutions that Land Innovation Fund has invested in will really help us in terms of measuring the impact of some of the interventions that you can have in agriculture in terms of carbon measuring. And I think we have to also bring some of this knowledge and develop this knowledge locally and share it abroad, because there are a lot of things that today maybe the methodology is more advanced, or it started in Europe or in the US, but it's not necessarily applicable to a tropical agriculture. So in Piracicaba, and I'm sure in other cities, the academia is looking very much into what are our solutions, right? What are our methodologies? What makes sense to tropical agriculture? How can we incorporate our baseline, which is a baseline of a much more sustainable agriculture, into these methodologies, where we will be able to show emissions reductions, we will be able to show our carbon footprint, but really considering what's our reality, what's our climate reality, what's our soil reality, and also the coexistence of nature, which is very different than the coexistence of nature in European or in American markets, right? So here in Brazil, we have over 65% of our area still covered in native vegetation. If we look at European countries, that is as little as 4%. Right, so here we really have the pressure to not only feed the world, but coexist and respect nature in a way that we have, again, over 65% of our territory covered in forests, and we're expected not to deforest any further while we're still increasing the production of food. And I think we can do that. We can do that when we invest precisely in restoring land that's already been opened, making that land more productive, but then also looking at what makes sense for local agriculture. So does irrigation make sense to local agriculture? In a lot of cases, it makes a lot more sense than in other countries in the world. So also about 2 weeks ago, I was in Goiás, and a producer there, he can produce 5 harvests in 2 years. Nowhere else in the world you can harvest 5 times in 2 years, and that's thanks to irrigation. But then again, like the other panelists said, it's important to have the regulation that will allow that farmer to do that in a way that it's going to be long-term. So there are many regulations already related to the use of water, how many pivots you can have, how long the pivots can be working and irrigating, depending also on the amount of rain. And then that farmer, as we try to also help them understand how their business can be more sustainable, that farmer will understand, well, if I have a legal reserve and if I have a native vegetation in my farm, that will help me make sure that I'm going to have water to run my pivots, right? And also, if I have an issue with the availability of electricity, and if I have an area where I can put some solar panels, that will also make my production greener, and the product that is coming out of my farm will be a lower carbon product. So this is what basically my job working in sustainability in agriculture is, to be able to bring all of that information and translate that in ways that the producer can understand, invest in research to support that knowledge, and then also bring them solutions. So not only say, you can't do it this way, but coming up with different solutions that make sense for the business. Right? I think technology also in agriculture and in several other areas means the ability to reduce costs. And that's very interesting for the farmer, for the business person. And today, I'm not even going to start talking about smart agriculture because we're running out of time. But this is a very interesting area now with a lot of innovation. And it's all about efficiency. How can I apply a fertilizer or apply a disease control solution specifically where I need? I don't have to spray my whole farm, right? This, for the farmer, for some of the farmers mean, oh, it's great because it's cost reduction. For the environmentalist, it means, oh, it's great because it's less aggressive, it's going to be less residual, contaminating the water, the soil. So there's a lot of synergies, I think, between growing efficiently and respecting the environment through technology. And again, I think smart agriculture is a very exciting area that also we're seeing a lot of advances from the whole supply chain. It goes all the way from input companies to machinery producers and to the consumer goods companies that are also interested in investing in that because they rely on all of this combination of actors to be able to offer the consumer a better product.
Yes, please.
Just one point regarding the challenge. I think by being here in Innovative, organized by Wharton, definitely I mean one important challenge, not just for my company, but the sector, is people development, looking for training in education. I think in the next future, new technology, new demands, regulatory, more than ever, you need to prepare a very qualified workforce, the new generations. For my company, as example, as I mentioned, we invest in the new mill in Lençóis Paulista, 3 million tons, likely the largest and greenest mill in the world in the pulp. But in the same level, we invest a learning institute there for the employee. You have a full year calendar training in different levels. So this kind you can invest in CapEx, in OpEx, whatever, but you don't have the people, you will not deliver. So I think it's an important point to highlight here as a broad challenge, not just for agribusiness, but overall, but talking about the challenge that we just mentioned here, more than ever, you have the people, qualified people to prepare, like we do in Wharton for the new generation in order to face this challenge.
Yeah, so I hear many key words here, like we have human capital development, we have new technologies applied, we have regulation that should favor the production and also protect the environment. So I'm pretty sure many people are aware of the disasters that happened in Rio Grande do Sul. This is a question that came on the chat. So what do you see as areas among those keywords or others that you think would be ways actually for the agricultural sector or agribusiness sector to contribute avoiding such a catastrophic occurrences like that?
I think there is a sense of common responsibility. So sometimes we have discussion, I'm not going to the political side, of course. There is a public sector responsibility, is a private sector responsibility. I think you are two important. Each company has each plans regarding sustainability, people development, the respect for the climate, but you have some boundaries on doing this. So we can contribute as a company, you can contribute as a sector in trade associations, and also you have to have an open dialogue with the public sectors, authorities, in order to create long-term plans. So we have a benchmarks. So the public sector has very critical importance for developing the markets, But the private sector has a good expertise in terms of planning. So a disaster like that, I think, is a strong message that something is wrong, definitely. Né? And in terms of sustainability, more than ever, the discussion is a long-term commitment. When a long-term commitment, it's not just your company. It's the reason why I mentioned you have some point that you can control, but we have a commitment for society in a broad sense, in a social, in a community, also in the relationship with the stakeholders, by putting your efforts to, I mentioned, we invest in 49 social projects, not to have this as a tagline. We do believe it can transform people's lives. I think they are priced the same sense in order to avoid this kind of disaster, to open dialogue, to understand the cause, instead of not just discuss the effects. That's a big discussion.
Right. I really like this point of thinking together and also collaborations between private and public organizations. Professor Betty, what do you think about how could the sector also contribute to minimize the effects or even prevent them if possible? I know that's another tricky question, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, a bit.
His revenge. Well, this collaboration is really needed, first of all. You have to have cooperation. Although the economist likes a lot of competition, sometimes competition cannot do everything. So you have this competition, cooperation, and learning with the agents that you are there. I had this beautiful experience in the sugarcane industry. And why I say beautiful, because everything that you discuss on sustainability, you can find some example that comes from sugarcane and after soybean as a raw material that is less pollutant, let's say. And one beautiful example is vinasse. I wrote here vinasse because I don't know why I always forget the word vinasse in English. But this is a really beautiful example because vinasse was a contaminant of the soil, of the water, and then it turned to be an input with non-carbon input. So I will use this vinasse instead of petroleum derivatives. So I have petroleum. Instead of petroleum, I would use vinasse. And also my tractor, the harvest machine, instead of diesel, we use biogas. So this is vinasse as well. I am not paid to explore this commercially, but this is really a beautiful example of technology and some where I can make the best with this technology. So the value chain will have to be coordinated in order to use in the best way something like the bio inputs. So, and Brazil has had lots of examples like that. Even in the meat industry, that is sometimes we are very unfair with these meats. But we have a very low productivity in this industry. And so I can maybe easily, not very easily, but easily to improve the emissions. So I am so many examples that come to my head, but I think we have a lot to do, not only in our diet, so food, but also with the whole
stakeholders.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, like collaborations, instead of competition, more coordination, right? So I think many topics that are interesting for managers. Leticia, I know that we are reaching the time, but you mentioned also information to the producer, right? So do you think like transferring information helps mitigating the potential effects of this crisis?
Yeah, so definitely, I think it's also our job, right, as a big company and other big companies that are out there to be the vector of taking that information to where it's most needed and where actually people can do something with it. Cargill also has another program called Regenera Cerrado, which is a program that we support farmers and connect them with the academia. So there are 12 farms involved in this program with more than 14 research institutes, including Unicamp, USP, UNB, Embrapa as well. And basically the farmers asked us, we're doing a lot of things in our farms, but we don't really know how good they are, or maybe they're not any good, or maybe they're bringing an even better result than we think. So can you help us understand? And this is how Regenera Cerrado was born, and we already published the first report. There's going to be a second report, and we were actually able to show that some of the interventions weren't very positive. Other interventions were very positive, where they had an increase in yield with a decrease in cost, and also that it was very important to have the right combination of different interventions, particularly interventions related to bio-inputs and sustainable interventions. And this reminds me also of the bioeconomy that Professor Farina talked about, right? So going all the way from sugarcane to maybe grains and other types of products. And I think Brazil is really in the forefront of bioeconomy and can definitely grow a lot in that area. It has all of the abilities to do that. And we're out of time, but I just wanted to also answer your question about Rio Grande do Sul. It's really tragic what happened there. As the panel mentioned, public-private partnership is very important to avoid these catastrophes. Information again, and also in sustainability, I think there's less of competition amongst the sector, but there is a lot of cooperation. There's a need of cooperation because some of the issues we tackle are too big for a company to deal by itself, and also, as Professor Farina has the theoretical background to show that some of the things you just can't invest by yourself, because then, right, you might be increasing too much your costs, and then the benefit will be a public benefit. So we talk a lot about public goods, but I think in this area there are a lot of public bads that we need to tackle together, because nobody can pay and solve the public bads by alone, right? No single company is going to do that. But we can tackle the public bads together, so that we can profit from the public goods, and then each company can profit from the public goods as much as they are smart enough to design their own policies and their own business plans to be able to profit from that. In Rio Grande do Sul, we have given a lot of support through the Cargill Foundation. So really then having an emergency relief, which is also very important. So you have to think ahead, but also there's the importance of having, working together to just see what's needed, where it's needed. I know a lot of companies did that. So the emergency relief that the private sector also provided support in Rio Grande do Sul, I think was crucial.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think closing the panel with this message of cooperation, right, and bringing good examples. I think sometimes Latin Americans, Brazilians, we only think about the bad examples, right, but we have many good and successful examples, right? So I think I would like just to give a hand to the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us.